This is the story of how John D. Rockefeller built history's greatest fortune. It is an amazing and interesting story. Watch till the end. The Anonymous Tyrant. In the bitter cold winter of 1870, inside a dimly lit, modest office in Cleveland, Ohio, a tall, thin man sat alone at his desk. He wore a plain black suit. He spoke in a whisper. He rarely smiled, and he never raised his voice. To an outsider, he looked like nothing more than a boring, harmless accountant counting pennies in a ledger. They were dead wrong. That man was John Davison Rockefeller. And behind those quiet, cold eyes was a mind plotting the most ruthless, calculated economic takeover in human history. Adjusted for modern inflation, Rockefeller's fortune would eventually top $400 billion. To put that into perspective, he was richer than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates combined. At his peak, he controlled over 90% of all the oil in the United States, meaning every home, factory, train, and street lamp in the nation paid a toll directly into his pocket. He was hated, hunted, and publicly condemned as a monster. The press portrayed him as a giant octopus strangling the American economy, and the President of the United States pledged to destroy him. Yet, every single time his enemies tried to crush him, Rockefeller executed a counterstroke so brilliant, so cold, and so completely unexpected that he emerged twice as rich as before. How did a penniless clerk's son pull off the greatest monopoly in history? To understand his dark genius, we have to go back to a strange childhood built on God, discipline, and a devastating betrayal. The con man and the ledger John D. Rockefeller was born into a household defined by a bizarre psychological war. His mother, Eliza, was a deeply religious, austere woman who taught young John to save every penny, pray daily, and view hard work as a divine duty. But his father, William Devil Bill Rockefeller, was the exact opposite. Devil Bill was a traveling con man, a pitchman who disappeared for months at a time, peddling fake cancer cures and living a double life with another secret family. Devil Bill bragged openly about how he raised his sons. He once boasted, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make 'em sharp." Young John learned two things early in life: never trust anyone fully, and master the numbers. At 16, he got his first job as an assistant bookkeeper in Cleveland. He bought a small red notebook, which he affectionately called Ledger A, and recorded every single cent he earned, spent, or gave to charity. Then came a moment that would alter the course of history forever. It was 1855. John was supposed to board a train out of Cleveland, but he missed it by just a few minutes. Moments later, that very train plunged off the tracks in a catastrophic derailment, killing dozens of passengers. While others saw a tragic accident, John saw something else: divine intervention. He became convinced that God had saved his life for a grand, holy purpose, and in 1859, that purpose presented itself when black gold burst out of the ground in Titusville, Pennsylvania. The early oil rush was absolute chaotic madness. Thousands of wildcatters rushed to dig wells, fighting, drinking, and losing their life savings. Oil prices swung wildly from $20 a barrel one week to 10 cents the next. Most men saw a golden opportunity to dig in the dirt and get rich quick. Rockefeller saw a sea of fools. He realized that drilling for oil was a volatile, high-risk gamble. The real power didn't belong to the men who dug the oil out of the ground. It belonged to the men who refined it, purified it, and controlled the supply chain. While everyone else was gambling in the mud, Rockefeller quietly built an empire around the bottleneck. The Cleveland Massacre. By 1870, Rockefeller had formed Standard Oil, but the refining market was flooded with small, inefficient competitors, creating brutal price wars that threatened to ruin everyone. Rockefeller didn't want to compete. He believed competition was an inefficient, sinful waste of resources. His goal was complete, undisputed control. So, he devised a plan so swift and ruthless, it became known as the Cleveland Massacre. In a span of just 4 months, Rockefeller secretly targeted 26 rival refiners in Cleveland. His strategy was terrifyingly simple. He would invite a rival refiner into his office, sit them down, and open his financial ledgers. He would show them Standard Oil's rock-bottom operating costs and secret rebate deals with the major railroads. Then came the ultimatum: Sell your refinery to me for Standard Oil stock, or I will flood the market with cheap oil and bankrupt you. If a rival refused, Rockefeller made good on his threat. He would drop his prices below cost in that rival's city, sustaining short-term losses until the competitor ran out of cash. When the desperate business owner was on the brink of ruin, Rockefeller would buy them out for pennies on the dollar. He never raised his voice. He never got angry. He simply squeezed them until they begged for mercy. Out of 26 competitors in Cleveland, 22 surrendered. With Cleveland conquered, Rockefeller set his sights on the entire nation. But his aggressive expansion triggered a massive backlash. The rival oilmen and railroad titans realized they were being eaten alive, and in 1872, they united to launch a massive boycott against Standard Oil. They cut off his train transport, intent on starving his business to death. Any normal businessman would have folded. But Rockefeller was already 3 steps ahead, planning a game-changing move that would break the entire American railroad industry. The Pipeline War. When the railroads tried to squeeze Rockefeller on freight rates, he didn't negotiate. He decided to eliminate the railroads entirely. Standard Oil engineers quietly began buying up long strips of land, stretching across hundreds of miles of wilderness. Their plan was considered impossible at the time: to build a massive network of underground iron pipes that could pump oil directly from the wells in Pennsylvania all the way to refineries on the East Coast. The railroads fought back with violence. They sent armed thugs to rip up pipeline tracks, blocked legal permits, and tried to sabotage production. But Rockefeller's crews worked around the clock, burying miles of pipe every single day. When the Tidewater pipeline was finally completed, oil flowed silently underground, powered by heavy steam pumps. Overnight, the cost of transporting oil dropped by over 80%. The railroads were devastated. Trains sat empty on the tracks, and several major rail companies spiraled into bankruptcy. Rockefeller hadn't just survived the boycott, he had completely paralyzed his greatest enemies. By the late 1880s, Standard Oil refined 90% of all oil in the United States. Rockefeller created the Standard Oil Trust, a complex legal web that allowed him to control secretly dozens of companies under one unified board. He had become the richest, most powerful private citizen on Earth. But as his power grew, so did the public's terror. The American people began to ask a dangerous question: who is actually running this country, the government or John D. Rockefeller? The monster unbound. By the early 1900s, the public rage against Standard Oil had reached a boiling point. An investigative journalist named Ida Tarbell, whose own father had been destroyed by Rockefeller during the Cleveland Massacre, published a relentless 19-part exposé detailing Standard Oil's secret rebates, corporate espionage, and ruthless buyout tactics. The country was horrified. Cartoons flooded the newspapers depicting Standard Oil as a giant, terrifying octopus wrapping its tentacles around state capitals, steel mills, and individual citizens. Then came President Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt rode a wave of populist anger into office, branding himself a trustbuster. He declared war on corporate monopolies and placed Rockefeller directly in his crosshairs. In 1906, the United States Department of Justice filed a massive federal lawsuit under the Sherman Antitrust Act, demanding the destruction of Standard Oil. For 5 agonizing years, the case wound its way through the legal system. Finally, in May 1911, the Supreme Court delivered a historic, unanimous verdict. Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly and had to be forcibly dismantled within 6 months. The empire was ordered to be broken into 34 independent companies, entities that would eventually become modern giants like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Marathon. The public celebrated. Roosevelt claimed victory. The great monster had finally been slain. Except, there was a massive twist that nobody saw coming. The ghost of Standard Oil. When Standard Oil was broken apart, Rockefeller still owned a massive percentage of stock in all 34 individual spin-off companies. Right as the breakup occurred, an invention was sweeping across America: the mass-produced, gasoline-powered automobile. Before this, oil was used primarily for kerosene lamps, and electricity was threatening to make it obsolete. But now, millions of cars needed gasoline, a byproduct of refining that Standard Oil used to throw away. Gasoline demand exploded. The stock prices of the 34 new oil companies skyrocketed overnight. Far from bankrupting Rockefeller, the Supreme Court's decision to break up his monopoly made him exponentially richer than he had ever been in his entire life. In a single decade, his net worth doubled, pushing him to become the world's first official billionaire. In his final years, Rockefeller turned his legendary discipline toward a new goal: giving his money away. He applied the same calculated, systematic approach to philanthropy that he had used in business, establishing the Rockefeller Foundation and pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into modern medicine, education, and scientific research. His funding led directly to the eradication of hookworm and the discovery of a yellow fever vaccine. When John D. Rockefeller finally died in 1937, at the age of 97, he left behind a complex, terrifying, and brilliant legacy. He was the ultimate corporate predator, a man who viewed chaos as opportunity and competition as a fatal flaw. He proved that true power doesn't come from fighting your rivals in the open, but from quietly controlling the systems, pipelines, and networks that everyone else relies on to survive. The empire he built was dismantled a century ago, but if you look closely at modern tech giants and global supply chains, the blueprint left behind by John D. Rockefeller is still being used today. If you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us create more videos like this. Also, check out my book, The Business Systems Blueprint, on Amazon.